and welcome to the first of what I imagine will be a series of short videos for our Honours Seminar, English 491, Approaching Media Studies. For our first video, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about media studies. I've asked us to read a couple of short essays, excerpts really, from the Media Studies Reader that we are using as a text for our course. A piece by Marshall McLuhan from his book Understanding Media. It's a short excerpt of a famous piece defining medium, a medium, and it contains a famous phrase: "The medium is the message." And another piece by one of the editors of our anthology, Caroline Bassett, which tries to explain some of the conflicts and complexities in the history of media studies as a field. So I'll just talk briefly about those for now, and we'll leave some further discussion to the class itself. So if we're asking what is media studies, we want to ask, I think, what is media? We want to think in particular about that term. And one of the first things to notice is that there's a grammatical problem. There's a grammatical problem in the question, because media is the plural of the Latin term medium. So we might ask, what is media? Or, and in its current usage, that's appropriate, but really, what are media? The term medium, from which media is derived, refers to middles or betweens. We might think of a medium as a kind of intervening substance. Those aren't my words, they come from your readings. Medium as intervening substance. So the word media has been used in medical contexts to describe membranous tissues, so flesh and things like that, that exist in between other organs or other aspects of the musculature and things like that. The idea of media has to do with what's between, or what exists in the middle. Marshall McLuhan's phrase, "the medium is the message," as I said, comes from his book Understanding Media, although he had been using it, I'm sure, for a number of years before the publication of that book, which was in 1964. One of the things you'll notice about that phrase, if you take a look at the reading, is that isolated on its own, it appears to contain no agent exactly. It's an ontological statement. The medium is the message, produces a kind of definition, and it also obscures, as I said, a certain degree of agency, so that you can't tell who's speaking. It appears there's no I in that statement. If you look at the actual essay, at the actual excerpt, McLuhan doesn't really use the first person singular, but he does use a first person pronoun. He frequently talks about our society, our world, so that there's a first person plural there, a we, a collective, that's assumed when we talk about media. Media tend to be intersubjective. That is, inter in Latin refers to between, or being with something. So something, an object, a substance that is neither here nor there in a certain sense, but intervenes, as I said earlier. Although in the word intervene, you can also hear that prefix inter. If we think back to our question, what is media, or what are media? Notice that McLuhan uses the singular, medium, and that the sentence sort of folds back on itself. And this is important when we're thinking about a kind of instability inside media and media studies. When we ask what is media or what are media, we're essentially activating a kind of, we would say, a kind of incommensurability and a kind of reflexive folding back onto itself of the term. Media tend to be divergent, plural, complex, and unsettled. One of the things that McLuhan's phrase seems to want to reduce to is, we would say, a kind of semiotic statement where, and this is a really reductive way to talk about this, I suppose, but where the form seems to subsume the content, where content is negligible, and what we're really interacting with is the structural, the formal, or the sort of communicative substance that messages travel on. We're trying to figure out what shape the intersubjective takes. How is it that forms of sharing are enacted? And that's a question I think you should put to yourself when you're watching something on television. You're really, for example, watching television. That is to say, watching the television. And television might be the name for the message, the content that you're actually receiving. The plurality of different media, though, and the sort of broaching of that reflexive question, that coming back to what constitutes a medium or how different media impact upon us, that leads us in the study of various media to a kind of set of overlapping and divergent concerns, which may or may not be methodologically precise, but which scholars and students of media, which critics of media, are trying to negotiate and trying to just work their way through. I'm going to suggest there are maybe 5 of these areas of concern that we want to just take note of here when we're starting to think about this idea of the reflexive, of the media, of media being its own message in a certain sense, or of attending to the form and structure of mediations. We want to think about the technological. When we say media, we often think about technologies. We want to think about the semiotic. Semiotics is the study of signs. We're really thinking about representation, and that's sort of McLuhan's tweaking of a kind of form-content relation is a way of drawing attention to semiotic processes. How do things get encoded? How are ideas or events or objects represented in different media? We want to also think about the phenomenological. So we've had the technological, the semiotic. The phenomenological refers to the experience of media. We're thinking often about audiences, but also about producers to a degree. How it is that we interact with media, how it is that different cognitive processes, different forms of consciousness are altered, shifted, raised, or even lowered by our connection to and our embeddedness in different kinds of media forms. That leads us to the biotic as well, particularly some attention to the human frame, to the human body. Although not necessarily human, we may not just be thinking about the human mind and the human frame when we're dealing with media. But in any case, the phenomenological leads us to question how it is that bodies intersect with and interact with different kinds of media, how the body itself is a kind of membranous construct, a kind of medium in and of itself, or a complex system of mediations. McLuhan, you'll notice, refers to media as our extended nervous systems. He thinks of them as instrumental extensions of the body, as prostheses in a certain sense. And finally, and this is maybe a way to sort of gather together all these other areas of concern. I said there were 5. We want to think about the material. Materiality can refer to history, it can refer to substance, empirical substance. It can refer to various sorts of flows and relations within the ecological or the biological aspects of the world. It can refer to all kinds of things. So in many ways, and this is at the end of Caroline Bassett's essay, you'll see that she calls for a return to a careful study of various aspects of the materiality of culture within media studies. We want to think about those materializations of ideas, of information, and to try to address some of the consequences and impacts of those materialities. Finally, I just want to draw our attention to a term that Bassett uses early in her essay, and that's convergence. As we're thinking about these different areas, often our attention will be drawn to the convergence, to the kind of interzones, the intersections, the spaces, maybe the points where different aspects of the media encounter each other, sometimes to produce a kind of fusion, sometimes to engage in various kinds of resistances and incommensurabilities. So to sum up, we're looking at, in this class, at least 5 senses of the kind of plural aspect of media: the technological, the semiotic, the phenomenological, the biotic, and the material. Those aren't really discrete areas, as I said, but they tend to converge on and diverge from each other in what I hope will be some really interesting ways.